Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Maureen Conway. I'm Executive Director of the Economic Opportunities Program here at the Aspen Institute, and I'm very delighted to welcome everybody to today's webinar on our Job Quality Fellowship. The purpose of this webinar today is to really give an overview of the fellowship and what it will accomplish with it, and then really answer people's questions. So our presentation part of the discussion will be fairly brief, so that we can get to your questions. I want to make sure that everybody's clear on the technical issues of the webinar just briefly. On this slide, you have the information about the webinar. The key thing to note in red at the bottom is if you have any problems, contact Tony Mastria. If people can't see, it's Tony, Tony.Mastria, Mastria, at aspeninst.org. So please contact Tony if you have any questions. The other crucial thing to note is that, as I mentioned, we really do want to hear your questions on this webinar. So please type any questions into the chat feature, which is in the lower left of your screen, and we'll be compiling questions and trying to respond to them as best we can. So I hope that takes care of the technical issues on the webinar and that everybody can see and hear. On today's presentation, in addition to myself, we'll hear briefly from Sarah Kay, as well as from Mark Popovich, my colleague here at the Institute. And so we will do that in just a minute. I'm doing the introduction and overview portion, and then we'll hear from Sarah about why job quality is important, and Mark will give some more details on our process for selecting fellows. Okay, so just to give a little overview of the fellowship, and first of all, I just have to apologize. We seem to be having some problems muting the lines, so hopefully, just so everybody knows, we're having problems muting your lines. So if people can, not eat a crunchy pretzel by the phone, that'd be awesome. Okay, so we will forge ahead. So the Job Quality Fellowship. I just wanted to say a couple of words of how we came to doing the Job Quality Fellowship. Many of you are familiar with the work of the Economic Opportunities Program, the work of the Workforce Strategies Initiative, and some of the work we've been doing for many years around trying to help low and moderate income people connect to work through which they can achieve self-sufficiency for themselves and hopefully for their families. One of the challenges we've run into is that so many people, even though they become skilled, may be connected to work that isn't sufficient to support themselves or to support their families. And we know that 1 in 4 working adults today earns a wage that's insufficient to lift a family out of poverty, and 27 million people receive the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a fairly sizable portion of the labor market. So work on its own is struggling to offer the pathway out of poverty that we like to think that it would. So that's kind of the background that brings us to thinking about what are the other ideas so that we can not only think about how can we improve people's capacities and their ability to work and work productively, but what are the ideas for making work more rewarding, so that it does offer that pathway. And we've learned a lot about the roles and the things that different actors are doing to try to connect people to better work. So really we want to think about how can we encourage the creation of work that does enable individuals, families, and communities to thrive? How can we highlight ideas and leaders who are tackling that question? How can we lift up ideas from all different sectors that might be exploring this question? And so that was really kind of what drove us to think about creating a job quality fellowship program in which we can really highlight the work that leaders are doing on the ground today, whether they're running a company that's creating a better than industry standard quality job, whether they're engaging businesses in their community about how they could create better jobs, whether they're doing that from the perspective of workforce development or economic development or as a community investor or from some other kind of strategy. But what are the ideas? What are the leverage points? Who's tackling this question of quality work? And how do we lift up leaders that are really doing this work, learn from them, support their work, and offer them a great experience. So that's really kind of what we were thinking about in terms of the Job Quality Fellowship.
Okay, this is Mark Popovich. I work with Maureen Conway on this program and other colleagues at the Economic Opportunities Program. As you can see from our participants list today, there's a great interest in this fellowship offering that Aspen is organizing with support from the Prudential Foundation. We have 112 participants currently on the line for this call, and we have a good number of nominations that we've already received. So the first thing I want to emphasize for folks is this aspect where you must be nominated, and you can self-nominate it or nominate, or you can have someone else nominate you in order to get the link for the application form. Then you must complete the application form and submit the application form. It should be technologically more enabled than we're having on this call right now, in that you should be able to begin your form, filling it out, providing information, save it, return to it before you complete it, and submit it. There will be, once we've received the applications, a staff screening process, and we will come with a group of people who are qualified for selection to a selection committee of 3 outside of Aspen colleagues who will weigh in and give us their recommendations. So this really is an open call for the inaugural class of the fellowship. So it's a pretty wide open area. We're looking for across sectors. We're looking across fields. So fields of work could extend beyond economic development, community development, workforce development, business development services. It could include folks who are working in either the public, the nonprofit, the private sector. It include community-based organizations, labor or workers' voice organizations, and and also at the local level in terms of policymakers and civic leaders who are at the implementation end of things. So there is, in this first inaugural group, a focus on implementation, and people will be selected in part because of their attention to and engagement with implementing these ideas. There are certainly other ways beyond implementing policies, programs, and strategies and tactics that you can affect job quality. Those may be the focus of further groups of fellows in the future. But for this one, it's really focused on implementation. We are looking for folks who have a fairly high level of span of control or authority within their organizations or in engaging with other organizations and partners that they work with. And we are certainly looking for people who are committed to change and they are positioned in their organizations to help make change happen. Diversity is highly valued. We want a good diversity and inclusion, a representative group that brings different voices, and communities that are often left behind should be included in this. So we're looking across urban, rural, suburban, places that have been economically isolated or depressed, or places that have been recently received economic shocks to their communities. So it's a pretty broad call in terms of being open, but it will be a competitive process. So you can look at the criteria and you can look at the number of people who are likely to apply and consider that and whether you want to move forward. We do encourage people to apply. We won't be able, at this point, I don't think, to be able to give feedback on individual applications, but we will try to answer questions along the way in terms of general questions that would come up. And we have on the website for the program a place for you to send those questions, and we'll respond to those.
Yeah, and I did see one question that somebody sent in asking if we would give preference to people who are nominated by somebody other than themselves. No, it's perfectly fine to nominate yourself. When you are nominated, just so you know, you must be nominated to apply. So you can nominate yourself or get somebody else to nominate you. If somebody else nominates you, the information that's included in that will be part of your application. But once we get the nomination, we send out applications. So you'll get a return email that will give you application materials. Those go out on Mondays and Thursdays. So if you nominate yourself on a Tuesday, or if somebody nominates you on a Tuesday, you're not going to get the application material until Thursday. So it's not an immediate it's not an automated reply to your nomination. Just so you understand, the nominations are compiled and then it's sent in a batch email on Mondays and Thursdays.
So we have a question about how many will be selected in the first cohort.
15 will be selected in the first cohort.
I should also mention that for anybody who has missed the audio on this call, it has been recorded and will be available for a replay later if you have questions.
Yeah. And also, I see a question about, can you nominate yourself and somebody else? Yes, you can nominate yourself and nominate a friend. That's fine.
Or many friends.
That's a good question. Somebody asked if how will we know if our nomination was received? And I assume this means if you nominate somebody else. That is a good question.
They'll know if their nomination was received when they get an application notice from our program.
Right. But we have not been notifying nominees. But if you're concerned that your nomination wasn't received, you can send an email to eop@aspeninst.org. Or you can if you're talking with the person that you nominated, you can ask them if they received an application, because they should have gotten it either the following Monday or Thursday.
Right. So question is this a paid or unpaid fellowship? It is an unpaid fellowship. Certain expenses to participate in the 3 planned group meetings will be either covered directly by Aspen, such as housing and food on site, or reimbursed, such as travel expenses. So it's not compensated in terms of your time. We expect that would be covered by your sponsor, the organization that you're with now.
Yeah. There's a question about the time commitment. So as Mark just referenced, there are 3 planned in-person meetings. And the first one begins on a Sunday evening, October 1st, and goes through the 3rd out in Aspen, Colorado. So we'll have 2 more meetings of a similar length during the course of the fellowship. And then we will likely have some between meetings calls or touch points of that nature. There would be some questions about work that would be done in between meetings in terms of advancing your agenda, but our expectation is that work would be something that you're planning to pursue in any event. But we would probably be trying to engage with you in how we highlight that work, how we learn from that work, and how we bring that into the fellowship experience in a constructive way.
So we have questions about the if the application notices have been sent out yet. Applications have started to go out, but there may be, as we said earlier, a little bit of a delay if we get an application in on Tuesday. If we get a nomination in on Tuesday, the nominee may not get the application until Thursday when we send it out. We have one individual asking about whether we sent their nomination. I'm not able to check that right now, but I will, when I get back to my office upstairs, check to make sure that that's gone out, or to send the application.
There's a question about, is the expectation to impact local communities or have a national impact? And the expectation is that the impact would be within local communities. That said, I think that one of the things we're hoping that the fellowship will do is contribute to a national conversation about job quality, and help to sort of frame language and a way to engage diverse stakeholders in talking nationally about the issues of job quality. But the intention for the work is really for the impact to be seen locally.
Is there an age requirement? No.
So there's a question about how much the committee will consider outside information, and maybe we should say a little bit about what some of the process is in terms of the application review and how we anticipate that going forward. So the application form itself is a series of about 7 questions. They're fairly, they're short answer questions. And to give us a sense of background of your work and your interest in job quality, we ask for a resume. You have an option of attaching a reference or something of that nature at that point. And so if you attach it, we will consider it. But in the first round, we'll just look at the information that's submitted, and we will then have a finalist pool that we will share with a set of external reviewers. And at that point, we may reach out for additional information or that sort of thing, as we're starting to try to go from a finalist pool to the final selection. But in the initial review, we will only look at the information that you're submitting.
In terms of, if you already know, of the three meetings, we know one date and we know the location, October 1 through 3 in Aspen, Colorado. If you already know that you have a conflict for that date and you don't believe that you can change that, I think you really should consider whether or not you want to go ahead and apply. You certainly should disclose that in the application process. I think since it is 3 meetings, missing the first one would be a significant issue.
There's a question about if somebody changes jobs after selection within their organization or to another organization, how will this impact their ability to participate in the fellowship? Again, I guess I would say if you think that you're planning to change jobs imminently and your next job would not be a fit for this fellowship, then you might want to reconsider whether this is the right time for you to apply. But if your next job within the fellowship is still something in which you are engaged in working on the issues that are pertinent to the fellowship, then there's no reason you would not continue on as a fellow. The fellows are selected as individuals, not as organizations, although obviously the work that they're doing in the organization that they come from is a key part of what they bring to the fellowship experience. But so we would not transfer a fellowship to somebody else within an organization. If you left an organization or something like that, the fellowship would stay with you. And we would hope to keep you as a participant if that was appropriate to the work that you were continuing to do.
There was a question around whether we're looking at firm level or community impact, and I think the simplest answer is yes. There's certainly, I mean, job quality and improvement in earnings and job stability and benefits, they certainly benefit individuals and families. They benefit communities. Communities can be broadly expanded into regions. And it also can be done in a way that really benefits the firms that are employers that are producing these better jobs. So I don't think it's limited to one or the other.
Okay. There's a question about whether the fellowship is for somebody who is working on job quality or whether it's for somebody. It seems like this question, as opposed to people working in workforce development who want to gain various resources to help them work on job quality. So I would say, yes, it is for people who are would frame their work as working on job quality right now. That doesn't mean that you couldn't be doing it, working on job quality from within an organization that's engaged in workforce development. Certainly you could be doing that. But you should have a way of framing how the work that you're doing now is meant to influence job quality.
Right, and that, I think, responds also to another question about how much does your current work in this area matter to the application process. I think this is a job quality fellowship. The focus is on this topic. There are going to be many applicants. Your work should be very closely aligned to affecting job quality outcomes, and you should be being able to project how being involved in the fellow would forward that existing work as opposed to bridging you into a new area of work.
There is a question about the curriculum and fellowship program and what will fellows be engaged in together. And to some degree, the fellowship, I would say, is a mix of peer learning, of bringing in external resources that can be supportive of the work that fellows are doing individually or across the work of different fellows, if that's appropriate. So it's a mix of activities that we do, and there are some that we can sort of we're sure that we will do, and there are some that we will see depending on the mix of fellows, because we do tailor this kind of work to the particular participants who are coming to make sure that it's of value to people individually as well as to the group as a whole. I'm sorry if that's something of a vague answer, but hopefully that was somewhat helpful in terms of how we think about doing facilitated dialogue around the issues of job quality in ways that support the work of individuals. At this point, I want to turn it over to Sarah Kay, and I want to thank both the Prudential Foundation and the Ford Foundation for supporting the Job Quality Fellowship. And Sarah from the Prudential Foundation has been a wonderful partner in this work and really very supportive. And I'd like to turn it over to her to talk a little bit about Prudential and how they think about job quality and why it's important to them. So, Sarah, let me turn it over to you. Sarah?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yay, we can hear you now. Okay.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Our apologies for the technical difficulties. Sarah, maybe you could say a few words about how Prudential thinks about job quality and why it's important to Prudential at this point. That would be really great, and our apologies.
Oh, no, not at all. And thank you all so much for joining us today, and I think Maureen and Mark have done a good job in providing the overview. But just to give you a little context in terms of why Prudential is invested in this, we were started as a company 140 years ago to give working families a way to protect their financial well-being by providing affordable insurance. And our commitment still to then and today is to advance society and share success amongst all communities. And so we've been putting our financial and human capital to work to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to build financial security. And we believe that that opportunity begins with preparing and connecting people to quality jobs. There are lots of different components of what makes a job of high quality, but we believe at the very foundational level that it should include livable wages, safe working conditions, stable working schedules, career advancement opportunities and benefits that include health insurance, paid leave, and retirement funds. And workers need access to these types of financial tools and resources to save and build their assets to be able to weather financial emergencies and invest in their future. But I'm sure, as all of you know, as you're interested in this fellowship opportunity, there's not enough good jobs out there, particularly for low-income populations. And we know that in today's economy, everything is intertwined. Businesses can't succeed without thriving individuals, families, and communities. And yet, low-quality jobs can be a core driver of that inequality. When a person faces instability in their work and wages, it can destabilize the individual, the family, and the community. And for all these different reasons in terms of what it can improve for the individual, it can improve their health, their life expectancy, provide a better quality of life. For the employer, it can lead to higher productivity, lower turnover, and improved reputations for the company as a manufacturer and employer of choice. And so for all of these different reasons and the challenges that we do face in improving job quality for low-income communities, we've partnered with the Aspen Institute and specifically with Economic Opportunities Program with Maureen and Mark and their team to help advance this critical dialogue with employers, policymakers, advocates, and communities, just really looking at what are some of the solutions that we can look towards and help scale around these job quality issues. And so we do fully believe that there are market opportunities to address this issue from both the labor and financial markets. And the fellows that will participate in this program will be critical to driving these solutions. And we're really excited that so many of you are interested in potentially being a part of it or recommending your colleagues. And we think that this will really help drive the conversation and solutions in this field.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really terrific.
So we had some questions about eligibility to apply, or if you're focused on state or national policy, or if you were a state legislature later. Of course, all of those areas are doing important work that could influence job quality, choices, decisions, and actions. I think I know our focus in this round is on implementation, and that seems a little bit more distance, but we would be interested in hearing about the interest of those kinds of folks to be involved in future fellowship and how we might be able to serve them, because there will be another round.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There will be another round, and it may, as we go forward, we may look at some of these issues of policy, or we may look at different factors more closely. So it's great to hear from people, and it's also great to hear because sometimes people apply for one fellowship, and we have many colleagues here at the Institute, so we might reach out and ask if we could share your information with somebody else. There was a question about will other meetings be held in Aspen? We may hold one other meeting in Aspen, but we will probably hold at least one meeting not in Aspen, and we have not chosen that location yet. So we have not. We will be choosing the locations of the next two meetings. Probably we will have the options to present at the first meeting and try to decide what works best for the group.
Right. So there'll be some back and forth with the group of selected fellows to both determine the final dates from a set of options and the final locations. There was a question around the time commitment. So the meetings themselves will entail, with travel time on average, about 3 days. There will be 3 of those meetings. You should assume that there's preparation work on your part if you're a fellow to get ready for those meetings. There may be readings, there may be discussion issues to consider, there may be information to bring together about your program and your efforts that we're asking you to share with others or to think about in coming into the meeting. And there will probably be some project work in between meetings, which would be somewhere in the around 3 weeks time, in addition to the meeting and meeting preparation time.
There is a question about whether the selection process includes any virtual or in-person elements. It does not include any in-person elements. For the finalist process, it is likely to include a brief telephone interview. That would be the only participation part that would be included.
There's a question about, more specifically, to ask us to engage around the issue of the ratio or the proportion of different kinds of, we have this broad call for different kinds of folks to apply. And do we have a sort of a sense going in for what the mix is that we want coming out? We don't. We know we want a mix. We want different voices, because in the room who come from different backgrounds and some different interests and representing different kinds of work, because we think that will strengthen it overall. But the really strong focus in selection will be the applications from folks who have both a commitment to doing this work and the potential that they've stated about how this work in the fellowship might strengthen their work back home and have impact in the world that they're working in. So those are more likely to be the selection criteria than we want one from column A, one from column B, and one from column C.
There was a question about previewing the questions on the fellowship application form. Really, it's just asking you to describe your work, how your work is meant to influence job quality, your goals for the next few years, how you think your experience, and this is important, how your experience and perspective could be of value to other fellows in the context of a fellowship. So how you could contribute to peer learning, as well as what you would want to learn from a set of your peers. How you think about the outcomes of your work and what kind of data, information, or other kinds of things you use to see whether you're making progress, sort of recognizing that sometimes advancing a job quality work and trying to influence job quality is something of a more systemic change rather than changing individual by individual. Sometimes that can be hard to find the right data measures for. So it's just a question of, given your strategy, how do you assess progress? And those are the main, and then there's just an opportunity for you to share any other information that you think we should consider. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also attach references, recommendation letters if you would like. And that's basically the structure of the application process, of the application form, excuse me.
The term for the fellowship is a year, 12 months. That was one question. And then there's a question around research, interest in people who are doing research as fellows who are doing research that have a national span but a community level implication. So generally speaking, researchers are not the focus of this first inaugural group, but we would be interested in hearing more about how you might think researchers could benefit from a fellowship engagement in job quality, again, in terms of our thinking about the second round. Yeah. Although we know many researchers and they're doing important work in this field, or make a decision in terms of how you're bringing a group together, and this group is more closely focused around implementation.
Yeah. So there was a question about how the fellowship program will be evaluated. That's a good question. I think that maybe I should let Sarah say. From my own perspective, I think that we are looking, to sort of see, are there ways that we feel like we see ideas that we're able to highlight from the selected fellows that have resonance with other organizations that are engaged in practice in different communities. So that would be, so we're looking to see how can the fellowship contribute to spreading ideas and encouraging further innovation. How can the fellowship also contribute to further discussion and conversation around the job quality challenge and sort of advancing a narrative. So these are things that are hard to evaluate, but these are the kinds of things that we're hoping that the fellowship will contribute to.
So we are more than a half hour into the scheduled time of the webinar, and we still have 106 people signed up. Or encourage you to continue to add questions in the Q&A box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. They've been coming in at a pretty good pace, and appreciate your engagement with us today. Recommendation letters. Recommendation letters are not required. We'll take a look at them, but it's the sort of college application answer, which is it's a holistic look at the application overall and the information that is there overall, and there's not particularly strong weight put on a recommendation letter as a single item in that portfolio.
There's a question, is this a fellowship that will be offered again next year? So yes, we do have, again, thank you to the Prudential Foundation. We do have support to do this again next year. As we've been sort of referencing, given that this is our inaugural year, we expect that we will also be learning as we go. And so we may offer it in a slightly different form based on what we learned this year, or with maybe a slightly different focus. That's something that we'll be thinking about and looking for input on, but we will offer it again next year, yes. Will foreign applicants be considered? I think that this job quality fellowship is it is only 15 fellows. So I think I would not want to go too far afield, and I would want a context that is not too dissimilar from the U.S. context, since we really did design it with sort of the U.S. economic conditions in mind. So from a country that could make the case that they're grappling with issues that are similar to issues that we grapple with in the U.S. relative to job quality, then we would be interested in seeing that application. But, I wouldn't want it to get too far outside of that sort of framework.
So we have a question around, are senior executives from particular industries of interest to add to the cohort? Certainly senior executives from businesses who are working on improving job quality within their own company, perhaps more broadly in the region, perhaps as increasing standards within their industry overall, would certainly be of interest in and are specifically mentioned among the applicants that we're interested in the frequently asked questions and eligible nominations. We have not, at this point, focused in on any particular industries. I think we'd be interested in you describing, if you're such a person, describing why that industry should be of interest. We probably would share your view about why you think that industry is of interest. But no, we haven't selected, for example, some aspect of healthcare or some aspect of manufacturing or retail. Those are all sectors that we work in different aspects of the projects going on in the Economic Opportunities Program and more broadly at Aspen, but we're not focusing in that way in terms of the selection process. So encourage you to apply.
There was a question about what is the email to request an application for the program. Again, you need to be nominated to get the application for the Job Quality Fellowship, but you can self-nominate, and the way to be nominated is to fill out the nomination form that's available through the website. But if you're struggling to find that, or you can't find that, you can send an email to eop@aspeninstitute.org, or you can always send it to Tony, since you have his email written down there earlier. So that works too.
Right. So around responsibility for devising and delivering the fellowship experience with this initial cohort of 15, we have resource support and advice and ideas from the Prudential Foundation and the team there, but the responsibility for implementing the fellowship lies with Maureen and the team at the Economic Opportunities Program.
Okay. In terms of we have a question about the weights in terms of the selection criteria and what's the balance of the weights between the project and the background and experience of the applicant. And that's an interesting question. I think that this is one of those I'm going to say yes. They're both important. I think really advancing some innovative idea is something that we're going to be looking for in the applications. But we do also, of course, want individuals that have some experience, perspective, and give us a sense of why they're doing what they're doing and how that fits with the other things that they've done professionally. So both are important, and I think that the application will give you a chance to share information with us on both of those questions.
I was pleased that somebody asked about the schedule, because then I could put up the schedule slide, which everybody should have in front of them. Again, remember, you have to be nominated or nominate yourself in order to get the application. Application materials on a rolling basis. The link to do your application will be sent out. That's starting now. The nominations deadline is July 10th, so we need to get all the nominations in hand by then. And then there will be another week period of time before the deadline, the final application deadline, closes on July 17th. So in August, we'll be reviewing the applications, narrowing it down, going to the selection committee, getting to a final cohort, doing some calling and getting hold of you for some phone interviews, completing those, and then we have at the beginning of September the selection and notification of the initial group, and then you have the dates now that that should be on the calendar for the first fellows convening in Aspen, Colorado, which I would assume would be a lovely time of year to be there.
It should be a very lovely time to be there. There is a question: if you don't get a request for a phone interview in August, do you know that you're a no? No, that it may be that in reviewing your application materials and in conversation with the members of the selection committee, that enough is felt like it is known about the applicant that we don't need to pester you with a phone interview. So it's not definite that everyone will have a phone interview who is a finalist. So if we don't call you up, that's not necessarily any indication of the standing of your application.
So process for notifying all applicants who've not been selected, we would do that in the timeline here towards the end of the selection and notification process. We'll let folks who've been nominated, who submitted an application, know what the group is that was selected.
I also just wanted to mention, in terms of, there's been some questions about our communications back, in terms of will we notify you of this and where your application is in certain stages. So I did want to mention that we will make sure that when we receive applications, so similarly to how we're sending them out in batches, as we receive applications, we will send batch notifications to whoever sent them within a particular interval that we have received them. So probably, again, it will be a Monday and Thursday notification process. So if you send us your application on a Tuesday, then Thursday you should get a note saying that we received your application. If you don't, please feel free to follow up with us and make sure that we received it. But that's the process we'll use to make sure that people know we have your application.
There's a question around level from organization in applying and selection. Yeah, I think it's because it's the inaugural group, and because there is great interest, and we're only able to select 15 at this point. We are, and the focus is on implementation. We are talking about more senior people who are involved in a span of control within the organization, helping to make decisions and helping to implement those decisions. This really isn't a fellowship that's thought of as for a promising but very early stage career person to get some engagement with a national group. It's more of the senior involved for some time, being able to augment what they already know and already do and build their capacity to accomplish more.
There's a question about whether the fellowship is for strictly for professional development and whether there is an honorarium for participation. So there is not an honorarium for participation in this fellowship. That said, we've been really pleased with the interest in this fellowship, not only through the number of nominees and the number of people on the call today, and thank you again for joining us, but also some other funders that we've spoken with are also interested in these ideas. So our hope would be that we could connect fellows who work on particularly innovative ideas to maybe additional funds to support their work, but this would not be sort of a of an honorarium for participation in the fellowship, but rather sort of a way to highlight your ideas and maybe connect to seed money if that was appropriate. And that's certainly not a guarantee, but that's something that we're certainly actively thinking about.
And if you have an idea of where we might talk to a program officer or a foundation to raise those funds, you can send that to Tony, and he'll send it to us right away. Is any organization or setting too large or too small for fitting within this fellowship? And I think the clear answer to that is no. I mean, we're looking for some level of diversity, so we wouldn't want just all of one size or all of another size. We do want a mix, because it is as the context change, some nature of the work changes, though the objectives stay the same. So I think it's worthwhile to look across those across different sizes and settings in order for there to be group learning from it.
There's a question, what if one is currently independent, seeking another opportunity, but has been professionally applied at senior levels for many years and is currently active as an advisor? I think this is getting into some of the specifics that can be a little bit difficult, because probably that would depend on how active you are as an advisor. And, is there something that you can be actively working on and advancing during the course of the fellowship? And I think that's really kind of the crux of the question. Is there some work that you can be moving forward during the course of the fellowship? Is there some ongoing work that the experience of advancing you're going to be able to bring back into the fellowship and share with peers in the fellowship? So I think that's how I would think about that question. And does that sort of fit with where you are professionally at this point?
Right, and I think overall, if you're nominated or you nominate yourself, take a look at the application form, the questions there, and think about how you would fill those out and provide information about those, so that if it allows you to make a clear statement about what your situation is, so that it can be fully considered both by staff review and by the selection committee. So I don't think it's going to be too burdensome to apply, so I guess the advice would be apply.
Yeah.
We're looking for questions. We're coming up on 3:25, which is 55 minutes into the call. So if you have more questions, we're happy to field them. Go to your bottom left-hand corner and type something in.
Right. Well, I think we can give everybody a couple minutes back in their day. Thank you all so much for participating in this call and for all of your great questions. there's a couple of the other two meeting dates we have not set them yet. And do we consider organizations who advocate lobby Congress for national policy changes? That probably the national policy change is probably not the focus of this particular fellowship at this time. We're really focused on work that's sort of more practice in local communities. So again, thank you to everybody for your great participation in this call. If you have other questions that weren't answered and that aren't included on our FAQ, please do go ahead and send an email to eop@aspeninstitute.org. And we are really delighted to have this interest in the Job Quality Fellowship, and we hope we'll hear from you. Thanks everybody so much for being with us today.